So research integrity is currently getting quite a lot of attention in the UK. This is largely in response to the House of Commons Science and Technology Committee inquiry into research integrity that was conducted back in 2017. And the inquiry found that while there's generally a healthy research culture in the UK, the voluntary nature of the national codes and the guidance was not sufficient to guard against irresponsible practice, and that more could be done. So this has proven to be a catalyst for a number of research integrity related initiatives. And this includes the revision and strengthening of the Concordat to support research integrity. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this. So this was originally published in 2012, and the Concordat sets out 5 central commitments to help ensure that the research produced by or in collaboration with UK institutions and researchers is underpinned by the highest standards of rigour and integrity. The revision of the Concordat in October last year was intended to make expectations of institutions clearer and to facilitate monitoring the implementation of the requirements. In addition, a new study is currently underway, and this was commissioned by Research England and is being led by VTI. And this builds on the Science and Technology Committee's recommendations through examining the research integrity landscape. And this study will really focus on the incentives and pressures in the UK system and their influence on researcher behaviour. So all of this is very much linked again to that important idea of research culture that we touched on with the Wellcome Trust report. And so against this backdrop, there's been a renewed sector-wide call for the provision of high-quality training for researchers on good research conduct and their professional responsibilities. And so I'm really pleased to be able to introduce to you the second edition of our Research Integrity Programme, which was published last week on the 24th of February and has been comprehensively updated and fully tailored for the UK to respond to these current concerns and challenges. We've very much taken this idea of a healthy research culture as a springboard for developing the new edition, rather than sort of one of tick boxes and compliance. As we try to take a really positive approach to introducing researchers to the rewards of good research conduct and the benefits of recognising and upholding their professional responsibilities. So the programme will provide core training in research integrity for beginning researchers in the UK, so postgraduate and doctoral students, early career researchers. It identifies the principles and responsibilities required of every researcher throughout the research process, from planning through to publication and beyond, and it provides really practical advice on dealing with complex issues. So it will therefore help institutions to deliver consistent institution-wide approach to integrity training across all disciplines. It will help institutions meet their commitments to the revised and strengthened Concordat, and it will help to embed a culture of research integrity through guiding researchers in their professional responsibilities that are relevant to their work. We've been very privileged to work with an expert team of research integrity specialists in developing the programme content. The lead advisor and author of the programme is Nick Stenick, who is Professor Emeritus at the University of Michigan and is a key figurehead in research integrity and has been for a number of years. He founded the World Conferences on Research Integrity, and as our lead advisor and author, has contributed significantly to the shape and content of the programme. Dr. Simon Colstow, who is Senior Lecturer in Research Ethics at the University of Portsmouth, is the adapting author for the UK edition of the programme, and he's carried out all of the UK tailoring of the content to ensure that it's accurate and relevant for UK researchers. And we're really pleased to be working with Simon on the programme. He's currently playing a huge role in the National Research Integrity Agenda. So back in 2017, he was invited to provide oral evidence as part of the House of Commons inquiry. He's the ARMA Research Integrity Special Interest Group leader. He's a UK RIO advisor, and he chairs National Research Ethics Committees for the NHS, Public Health England and the MOD. So very busy with lots of integrity related things, and we're really grateful that he was able to squeeze in the work with us. Dr. Matt Parker, who is Senior Lecturer in the School of Pharmacy and Biomedical Sciences at Portsmouth, is an expert in research involving animals, and so he took on the role of adapting author for the particular module that covers that topic. We're also extremely grateful to have had such expert input from our peer review panel, and these were made up of research integrity specialists and also PhD students as members of our target audience, based at the universities you can see on your screen, so Durham, Hull, Liverpool, Oxford, Sheffield, Stirling and Sussex. The reviewers have actively and comprehensively improved the content at every stage by ensuring that it's accurate, well designed and meets the needs of UK institutions. And they have also provided us with plenty of positive feedback, as some of the example quotes on the screen show. Here's the list of the 8 modules that make up the published core programme. Each module will take around 30 minutes to complete. The first 2 modules very much deal with the fundamental concepts in research integrity. So module 1 covers good research conduct and its key principles, outlining the professional, public, institutional and personal responsibilities that all researchers should be aware of. Module 2 then tackles this from the other side, looking at irresponsible research practices and how research misconduct is defined in the UK and the impact of this. How to distinguish misconduct from potentially less serious but still questionable research practices, and how to report irresponsible practice. Modules 3 to 8 then step through each stage of the research process, providing detailed practical guidance on researchers' responsibilities throughout the research lifecycle and testing knowledge of this through challenging activities and scenarios. There'll also be 5 supplementary modules, and these are due for publication in May. These cover more specialised areas, many of which will be relevant to all researchers, but others, for example, the care and use of animals in research, will only be relevant to those working in certain fields. The coverage of these 5 modules is still very much focused on issues of integrity, so they don't provide detailed step-by-step guides on how to apply for a patent, for instance, to use module 12, for example. But they outline researchers' responsibilities in each area and the major UK national policies that exist, institutional processes, and what can go wrong if responsibilities are ignored. So what are the key features of the new edition? So as well as fully updating the content so that it's accurate and relevant for researchers in 2020, every module has undergone substantial tailoring for the UK, both in terms of reference to the UK policies, newer legislation, including GDPR, frameworks, institutional processes such as Concordat, and guidance provided by UK RIO, the UK Research Integrity Office, but also in terms of recent important developments where up-to-date guidance is desperately needed. For example, open access and research, predatory journals, impact of innovation, and research data management. As we've seen, the programme adopts a modular structure. The modules are designed and written as a full course, but the individual modules are self-contained and can be taken in any order, depending on the learner's needs and institutional guidance. So this will enable users to navigate easily through the programme and identify the content that they're looking for at point of need. And it will also enable more regular testing tied to each module's learning outcomes. The content has been streamlined significantly in comparison with the first edition, and each screen is succinct and accessible with a good balance between text and interactive activities, as you'll see. So there's either 1 or 2 activities per screen. The programme's been written so that it's suitable for all disciplines, focusing on those research integrity principles and best practice that's crucial no matter what field you're working in. However, we've also realised that it can be necessary and illustrative for certain pieces of guidance to give discipline-specific examples. So all of the video interviews with researchers have viewing options, allowing the user to select the video closest to their own field. And a number of the activities also have discipline options to select. And actually, these are really lovely, engaging activities. The discipline-specific scenarios really do help to bring the training to life. I'll go into the learning design in a little bit more detail, but just to say that the course has been rigorously developed using best principles in learning design and with a brand new pedagogical framework tailored for its audience level. And finally, here we trialled a new innovative development process for this particular programme, which allowed the peer review panel to access and comment on an interactive online version of the modules at a very early stage of developing the content, which let them see how the activities would work in practice. And so their feedback could be even more targeted and constructive. And we've found that that works really well for us. I won't go into detail about most of these features at this stage, as I'll show you some examples of them live in a moment when I give a quick demo of the course. I do just want to mention that last one though. So we provide a suite of blended learning activities alongside the module content, which are sent to institutions as part of the accompanying instructor manual. And so this includes suggestions or ideas for tutor-led and peer-to-peer activities that are tied to the module content and the learning outcomes. And they can be a really helpful resource to use when integrating the online programme into any existing or new research integrity workshops or training activities that universities carry out. And we're going to hear a little bit more from John about best practice in implementing the programme and the benefits of blending the learning a bit later in this webinar. Epigeum, we spend a significant amount of time developing the pedagogy of each of our programmes based on key principles and best practice in online learning design, as I said. The pedagogical approach supports users through the learning and assists the formative and summative testing within the modules. So as this particular audience is made up of postgraduate and early career researchers who are adult learners with very well developed academic skills, a good balance needs to be created between scaffolding the learning and over-testing the users through the activities. So to help create this pedagogical approach, we set learning outcomes and created a content framework for each module, both of which have driven the content development at every stage. So every content section in the entire course framework was then categorised, as you can see on the slide. So the first category is introductory or contextual information that isn't tested. The second is simple concepts for this particular audience level, for which the end of module quiz will be the main method of testing. The third category are concepts that may need some development or basic formative testing. And then the concepts will also be tested in the end of module quiz. And then the fourth category is for more complex concepts, and formative testing is far more important or more extensive for these concepts. So it's been really quite a rigorous process, and this categorisation has really helped to determine the type of activity which is appropriate for presenting the content. So categories 1 and 2 we consider as input sections, as the main aim of the screen content is to provide information or background material. So different ways that we've used to present this information is through animations, through videos, illustrations and infographics, text, and sort of presentational activities. And categories 3 and 4 can be considered as developing knowledge categories, as some form of testing is needed. So some instances will only need a relatively simple activity, whereas others might require something more involved or a sequence of activities. And we've used things like action mazes, scenarios, multiple choice questions, and some other activity types that ask the user to actively do or answer something. So let's have a look at some of this in action. I'm now going to take you into the course and we'll demonstrate some of the content. So I'd like to show you almost all of module 1 on good research conduct, so you can get a sense of how a full module works in terms of its learning design. I'll then dip into a few of the other modules to show you some of the key screens. So this will include module 2 on irresponsible research practices, which situates research misconduct within its wider context and shows what the UK and other countries are doing to promote a positive research culture. And this module also has a really good example of the challenging scenarios that are incorporated throughout the programme, so I'll show you an example of this too. I'll then show you the research plans screen from module 3 to give you an example of the really sort of practical guidance that researchers are provided with in the programme and the discipline-specific pathways that some activities take. And then finally, we'll have a little look at a screen from module 8 to show some of the ways in which we've updated the programme in response to feedback from institutions with recent developments in the research landscape. So we'll now just navigate to the Epigeum platform. Okay, so you should be able to see the Epigean platform now. Institutions do have the option of hosting the course within the platform, or they can choose to use it within their own VLE, but yes, we'll show you on the Epigean platform for now. So this is the Research Integrity course. And if I just go into the first module on good research conduct, you can see the welcome screen here. And each module opens with a welcome screen like this that outlines the learning outcomes, what the learner will expect to achieve at the end of the module, some instructions on using the module. So it highlights some of the key features and some instructions that you need to make the most of the content, and introduces our expert panel, so the authors and the reviewers. Here's the menu on the side, so you can see all of the screens listed in this menu. And after a very brief introduction here, the content really gets going with the definitions and concepts screen. So the first piece of content really kind of introduces you to the researcher's world and the importance of research integrity within it. And we've chosen to present this kind of background contextual material using an animation because it's a bit more engaging than just reading a whole load of flat text. I'm going to play a little bit of this. There's a very good chance that you won't be able to hear the audio of it because of the particular technical setup that we have now. But you'll be able to see just what the animation looks like. And you can request a trial access at the end of this webinar, so you can have a little go and listen to the audio content yourself after the webinar. So I'll just play a few seconds so you can see what it looks like. There is actually a transcript button here, so you can read the transcript of the audio, which is useful for accessibility reasons, but also if you're on the train and you don't have your headphones with you, you can read the content rather than listening to it. Okay. If I move on to the next screen, there's a nice example of something a little more interactive. So it starts with very basic but quite nice activity outlining the different sources of information and guidance that researchers can get on their professional responsibilities. But following this, there is a poll feature which allows learners to reflect on their own experiences and compare their answers to the peers in the wider research community. So in this particular poll, researchers are asked whether guidance on research responsible research practices is well developed in my field or area of research, and they can select whether they agree, disagree, strongly disagree, etc. So what they would do is click and vote, and then you can see the results of everybody that has taken the course in the poll. So that's a really nice opportunity to think about your own situation and your attitudes and compare them with others that are taking the course. So I'll move on to the institutional responsibilities screen. And this is where those commitments in the Concordat to support research integrity are outlined. And they are taken from the updated and strengthened 2019 version. So you can see them here. And this useful links pod can be clicked on. And there's a link here that will take you directly to the Concordat document. So the course user really has very easy access to that if they want to read more about it. For those of you who are outside the UK, there are customization options which can be discussed with our implementation and sales teams. One of the things that can be customized are these pods that you will see in the right-hand side of the margin. So, for example, if you are at a European institution, you might want to put the European Code of Conduct link there instead. If we keep scrolling down On this screen, you can see the first example of one of the videos that's used in the module. So each module includes video content, and this is really nice, engaging interview with Sarah Preston at Bath University, and she outlines her role at the institution, the role of her research support office, and the work that they do in sort of making sure that the university is meeting the requirements of Concordat, how they monitor progress. And there's another poll to finish the screen. Then I'll skip right down to the resource bank here. So every module contains a resource bank. And you can see this is really well populated with links to useful sources, extra reading, policies, guidance documents, lots from the UK, but also European sources as well. And so this is a feature in every module. The references screen that follows gives a list of all the sources that have been cited in the module, much like endnotes in a book. And then finally, every module will end with a quiz. And so the course user will be tested on 10 quiz questions, multiple choice questions, which have been randomly generated from a question bank of 40 questions. And these are very rigorously tied to the learning outcomes. So they're quite rigorously created questions. And the default is an 80% pass rate, but those institutions who use their VLE can set a different pass rate if they wish. And providing that the user makes that 80% grade, they will get a certificate which is automatically generated in our course. Okay, I'll now move to Module 2 on irresponsible research practices. And I'll just show you a couple of screens from this module. Having a think, there we go. So as I said, this module provides guidance on defining, avoiding and reporting irresponsible research practices and discusses the impact of irresponsible behaviour. And so on this screen on characterising misbehaviour, we start with looking at some global approaches to irresponsible practice. And across the world, in several countries, these are handled through either misconduct policies or codes of conduct providing guidance. And this activity gives the examples of the United States, Canada, and Europe, and goes into a little more detail on how each of these regions deals with misconduct, with some useful links in the pot next to it. We then go into much more detail on the UK approach, and particularly go into detail on the role of UK RIO, the UK Research Integrity Office. And then there's quite a nice little interactive activity that follows, which asks the user to select each of the terms associated with research misconduct and match it with the definition according to UK RIO's guidance. So as you can see, a correctly matched one will appear with a tick, and then you'll get a little error message if you don't get it correct. And so this is a really nice example of learning through doing. So those concepts will become much more sticky in the act of having to match them to their definition. And then I'd like to show you the application screen in this module. So every module ends with a similar application screen, which is tied to the module's learning objectives, and is a really good opportunity for the learner to apply the concepts that have been introduced throughout the module. So as you'll see from this one, they're usually scenario-led and structured as kind of branching action mazes. So the user is presented with a set of circumstances and asked to select what they would do, which will then reveal a new list of options as the scenario unfolds. So in this particular scenario, we meet Alif, this researcher here, and he's really cross because he thinks that the new paper that he's just read, published by one of his competitors, lifts part of his own work. And he feels that they should be reported for irresponsible conduct. And you're put in the shoes of the other researcher here and asked, how would you advise Alif? So you're given a set of options, So you can choose, no, this is just one of the risks of presenting papers, or this is a major breach of best practice, or you can ask to tell me more about the situation. So let's go with that option. And this is an example of where the scenario can change slightly depending on what discipline you select. So let's say I'm a social scientist. I spent months developing the survey that was the basis of my presentation. So if you'd selected a different discipline, this particular scenario would have been tailored slightly differently. But this is about participant surveys, very appropriate for social sciences. And then you're asked, how would you advise him now? So you can select whichever option, and you're given feedback along the way. This is quite a nice long scenario. You give them plenty of feedback along the way. So it's a really good example of the kind of challenges that researchers might face in real life and gives them opportunity to practice it in a bit of a safe space here. Okay, I'll take you into module 3 now on planning your research. And so this module discusses the features of a research plan, the importance of planning your research, and the research governance approvals that are likely to be required before you get going with your project. And so if I take you to the research plan screen, we can see quite a straightforward tabbing activity here, which is a good example of the really practical guidance that researchers will be given throughout the course. So if you click on each tab, there's a list of all the different questions that you should be considering while you're developing your research plan. And it's so easy when you're planning your project, you're enthusiastic about your research, to perhaps overlook certain aspects of timeline or budget, personnel. So this could be a really handy future reference guide for any new project that you're starting with. This is then followed by a series of video interviews. And again, it's an example of the discipline options that researchers can choose to select. So say if I'm an arts and humanities scholar, I would select that, and we can see the set of videos with arts and humanities researchers and answering questions about how they create research plans in their own field. There's nothing stopping users going back to the main menu and selecting natural sciences if they want to see a different set of videos. And again, these all come with transcripts. And then finally, I'll just show you one screen from the 8th module on communication, social responsibility and impact. Just thinking about it, there we go. So if I take you to the impact screen, this screen is a good example of where we've updated the content quite significantly in response to developments in the UK and also globally, and also in response to the feedback that we've been getting from the peer reviewers and from institutions. There's not a lot of guidance out there about how to go about your impact work with integrity. And so we've created a brand new activity on exactly that. So after a little bit of introductory material talking about the REF definition of impact, significance and reach, and funders' requirements, we have that new activity on maximising impact with integrity. And researchers are asked to drop each item according to whether they think it's an important consideration at the stage where they're creating impact, or whether they're evaluating it, or whether finally they're communicating it. So for example here, using quantitative and qualitative data accurately and responsibility to assess the reach and significance of the research, that sounds like you should consider it while you're evaluating impact to me. Yes, that's right. Taking care to avoid exaggerating the positive impacts of research. That's probably communicating impact, but I'll drop it into an incorrect one just to show you that you do get an error message if it's incorrect. So you can pop it in the correct column there. And there's a few different items for the researchers to drop there. The screen then moves on to different perspectives on costs and benefits. So positive impact for some might not be positive impact for everybody. So give some examples in this word cloud here of different types of research that can be used in different ways, both positive and negative effects. So again, it's a good example of how we really grapple with grey areas. There are a few easy rights or wrongs when thinking about research conduct and its potential impacts, and the course material really doesn't shy away from these grey areas, but rather it prepares researchers for how to handle them in real life.
So we'll just navigate back to the presentation, and I'll talk to you a little bit about some of the implementation support that we offer. So we do have a dedicated implementation team that provides ongoing support, and then I'll just mention a small selection of the things that we can help you with now, and then I'll give you a few more concrete examples of some different approaches you might consider taking in the next slide. There are actually two program delivery options. You can either upload the content to your virtual learning environment, so Blackboard, Moodle, Canvas, whatever you use, or you can use the dedicated online platform that we've just seen. Each of those options has its own advantages and disadvantages, and we would help you to take a decision basically based on whatever works best for your particular context. Now, if you do use our platform, the one that we've just seen, then you and any other administrators would be able to use a suite of reports that we have that allow you to track usage and engagement with the program. If you're a VLE user, then you would obviously have to do any reporting via your VLE reporting tools. So we also provide a comprehensive asset pack containing a range of customizable promotional resources, and we're happy to attend any promotional activities in person as well, or key stakeholder meetings at your particular institution if that is useful. And finally, we have a dedicated technical support team that will be on hand to help solve any technical issues experienced by end users. So hopefully that will take any queries that they may have away from you as a central administrator, and they just come straight to us. Right, so let's have a look now at some examples of different approaches that some of our partner institutions have either taken in the past or are considering taking with this new second edition. Now, obviously, not all of these approaches are going to work at all institutions, and you'd need to tailor your particular strategy to your target audience or audiences and your overall aims, of course. But at the very least, I hope that some of these ideas may provide you with a bit of food for thought. So firstly, several institutions actually run the course centrally, but then devolve certain aspects out to individual faculties or schools. This has included things like which particular courses may be mandated and for whom, depending on the specific faculty needs. For example, one faculty may wish to mandate the module on the care and use of animals in research, whereas others may not require this to be completed at all by their researchers. One institution that springs to mind has even invited individual faculties to create their own bespoke or tailored end of course quizzes, and the central team created an example end of course quiz that took our end of course quiz questions, but also incorporated their own local questions that they wanted to ask about local policies, etc. They created a central version of that to use as a guide that the faculties could then take away to sort of have a think about what they might want to do. And the faculties were actually also invited to consider using complementary assessment methods too, such as attendance at face-to-face sessions, or even further written assessment. Now, a word of warning with creating multiple versions of courses for different faculties is that obviously that then makes it more difficult to control or monitor centrally. Now, I mentioned the tricky word mandate in that first point, and it's always a bit of a difficult line to walk here. Do you wish to mandate content? If so, which courses would you mandate and for whom? What are the consequences of this approach? So obviously, whilst it will drive usage of the mandated content and could even encourage users to engage with non-mandated or optional content too, how do you enforce this, and what are the consequences of non-completion? So it's a difficult thing to consider. Now, a couple of examples that I'll just show on screen there of what institutions have done in this regard. One that I can think of works with their HR department to actually require all new staff to complete part of the research integrity training as a standard part of their induction. Staff are then required to prove completion by presenting a certificate as part of their probationary process. Other institutions have integrated the training into their application processes for external funding or internal ethics approvals. And others still have targeted only specific groups or cohorts of users for mandatory training, leaving it as an optional resource for everyone else. Some have included completion as part of promotional development objectives, or even as a requirement for promotion to more senior roles. So something that institutions already using the new edition that we've just seen are beginning to explore further is the option of embedding particular modules of the program over a staggered time period, targeting researchers at the most appropriate point of the research process. For example, the module on planning your research is going to be much more relevant earlier on, whilst other things, perhaps like the communication and impact module we've just seen, could be introduced a bit later on down the line. You could even go as far to consider things like adaptive release of content, where a module only becomes visible or available after completion of another. So it's going to be interesting to see how this approach evolves over the next few months with those users, as this is quite different from the first edition. Now, we find that awareness is often a barrier to engagement with the resources. So the most successful implementations have been at institutions that plan, for example, launch events for their target audience and that have an ongoing communication plan. For example, a couple of institutions will be running launch events for the second edition, one at a so-called research festival and another at their Research Integrity Awareness Week. In fact, Emma and I will actually be attending the latter to deliver a few sessions to introduce the resources to different groups there. As for the ongoing communication plan, a number of institutions have used the previously mentioned asset pack materials to save them a bit of time and to promote the program in their regular mail outs, their newsletters, bulletins, tweets, Facebook posts, VLE announcements, or basically whatever channel they choose to use. So this all helps to keep the resource at the top of people's minds. Now, finally, experience has shown that effective outcomes can be achieved when a blended approach to learning is used. Now, obviously, we understand that this may not always be possible for a variety of reasons. Distance learners, scalability of training are but two challenges, for example. However, as Emma mentioned, we do provide additional support resources to help you should you be considering this approach. And our instructor manual contains a number of suggested tutor-led and face-to-face activities that you could adapt to your own needs and use in workshops or seminars, etc. So in summary, I hope that that's given you just a few ideas on different approaches that some of our existing customers have used to good effect. But in any case, you can rest assured that in the implementation team, we'll work closely with you to help you to plan and execute a successful approach for your particular context.